January 30th, 1649, it's saying here, Charles of Fife. Charles of Fife, they're saying the king, but I'm just going to call him Charles of Fife. He was killed January 30th, 1649. Right after the English Civil War, there was a civil war amongst the English people. Some of them said, no, the king gets all the power. And then the other one said, no, Parliament gets all the power. And that was the war. They were the parliamentarians versus the royalists. And guess who's going to win? The parliamentarians. Charles of Fife. Why am I saying that's Barney Fife, right? Charles of Fife, Barney Fife. I'm being insulting because I don't give a shit about the royalists. I'm very exciting that the royalists had lost. The royalists, it's like a monarchy, theocracy, dictatorship, these things. We threw all this shit away like fucking 300 years ago. And, you know, this is the beginning of all this. We're going to eventually see a Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights are going to come about in 30 years or so, 40 years. And then the instrument of government, the immediate thing that we see is we get a commonwealth, we get a republic, and we also get a constitution. So get rid of your king and you'll see a constitution, you'll see a republic, and then you'll see a Bill of Rights. And then 3 branches of government. We also saw 3 branches of government. So why Charles of Fife? Because Fife is Charles's birthplace. There's some place called Fife, England. And Charles was born in Fife. So Charles of Fife, that's Charles of Fife. That's just a guy. That's old Chucky, old Chucky Chuck, old Chucky Chuck of Fife. I'm going to sit there and put a fucking title under that motherfucker. The sentence was carried out on a scaffold erected outside the banqueting hall of Whitehall on the morning of Tuesday, January 30th, 1649. It almost makes me feel like Charles of Fife, like, not only does he willingly go to get his head chopped off, he willingly goes and then kind of gives the signal. He seems resigned. He seems resigned to the entire spectacle. And he's acting like because he's willing to honor the judgment, he's willing to honor the judgment and sentence and lay his head on the thing. Therefore, everybody, since he was the king, needs to let him take his time and do his thing. So, in a way, yeah, I guess he goes bravely to his death, but stupidly to his death. Still claiming that he was a martyr for the people. I would have rather this Charles of Fife to have fought all the fucking way to the end. Just fight and claw and scream and fight and claw and scream. A martyr for the people. A week later, he was buried at Windsor, so he's going to get his head chopped off at Whitehall, the morning of Tuesday, January 30th, 1649. Charles I, that's, aren't we all, I'm John Masters the first, and you're that person, everybody's the first. Donald Trump the first, I guess, unless you're the second or third. But it's not, okay. So Charles of Fife apparently wasn't supposed to be king at all. Charles of Fife, Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, was supposed to be the heir apparent, but Henry Frederick had died at the age of 18 from typhoid fever. Uh-oh. That was the damn golden child. The older brother, oh my God, that was the one with the blessing. So with the death of their father, King James I, of course, not just Jimmy. I mean, we don't even say that about Jimmy Carter. Oh, Jimmy? You mean King Jimmy Carter I? In 1625, Charles I became King of England, Scotland, and Ireland at the age of 24. That son of a bitch thought that he could rule over everybody, and then he was like, and then we're supposed to act like, oh, it was thrusted on his shoulders. Poor Charles of Fife. Charles of Fife had the entire realm thrusted upon his shoulders when he was just 24. If you're the fucking royal family, you should have been expecting this shit for quite some time. If these damn kings and queens are so fucking smart, how come they can't find a successor? If you can't have your own children, then you pick a fucking Marcus Aurelius, you pick a goddamn Caesar Augustus. Immediately upon his ascension to the... Look at Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell picked the Attorney General of Kentucky. Who's way more impressive. Immediately upon his ascension to the throne, Charles offended his Protestant subjects by marrying Henrietta Maria, a Catholic French princess. He also deeply entrenched himself in the conflict with the Parliament of England, which was determined to subside his royal prerogative. So you got an English Civil War. You got the parliamentarians, who was also known as the Roundheads. So we're on the side of the Roundheads. And actually, when I think about the Roundheads, Obama said that there's the Roundheads and the long faces, the round faces and the long faces. So he would be a long face. And that's why he was the king, and the Roundheads were more the parliamentarians. That's why Michelle Obama would be a parliamentarian. They were led by Oliver Cromwell, who displayed tremendous fortitude as their forces won critical battles in 1644 and 1645. The parliamentarians also kept the royalists at bay as they attempted to invade Scotland. In 1646, Charles of Fife surrendered to a Scottish army. And 2 years later, he was forced to appear before a higher court controlled by his enemies. Oh, so you fucked with the Scots, didn't you, Charles of Fife? Charles of Fife was like declaring war on everybody, declaring war on the Irish, declaring war on the Scottish, declaring war on the English. And you were 24 and your daddy controlled shit, huh? So you get to control shit, and everybody's supposed to bow down and kiss your fucking ass, and you're not even saying shit that makes sense, and nothing you've done is making our world better. That the king, for the crimes contained in the charge, should be carried back to the place from whence he came, and thence to the place of execution, where his head should be severed from his body. So the memoirs of Edmund Ludlow, a parliamentarian at the time. 3 days later, at about 2 p.m., Charles of Fife was led to the scaffold erected at Whitehall, London. After saying a little prayer, Charles of Fife put his head on the block and signaled to the masked executioner that he was ready, and with one clean stroke, he was beheaded. The executioner then held the severed head up for the crowd to see. I once heard that there's an experiment about a person who had their head chopped off to see how long you lived afterwards to keep blinking. And I heard that they blink like 20 to 30 seconds afterwards. So this is supposed to be the executioner was saying that they were going to nice clean cut. So that way it would be as painless as, for Charles as possible. And then he's acting like he's going to go to his death like bravely. I guess he didn't like piss and shit himself and run. But I don't, is that good? Is that better? Is that he's supposed to be dignified in all things at all times until the end? I am dignifiedly going to go ahead and let you chop off my head. See how dignified he was? I guess John Oliver joke with Saddam Hussein. He got killed in a very fucked up fashion, and he says it's pretty fucked up when the most dignified person in the room was a mass murderer. But they also say it's like sausage, right? You don't want to see justice be made. It's like watching sausage get made. You just want the results. So 2 p.m. held the head up. I go to where, so that means he was probably still alive. When they held the severed head up, he was probably still alive, looking and blinking at everybody while the blood was pouring out of the neck. I go to where no disturbance can be. So January 30th, 1649 was a bitterly cold day. Very cold. January 30th. Charles of Fife goes to his execution. He wore 2 heavy shirts. And they were saying that he better have 2 shirts because if he shivers in the cold, he didn't want it to look like he was afraid. It's cold out here. I'm shivering because it's fucking cold. Well, he's about to chop off my head. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that. And this is kind of fucking crazy because after the French Revolution, you're going to have Edmund Burke that's going to write a thing that says the main fear of man to be afraid of is a violent death. That's the biggest fear of man, to have a awful, violent death. And then from that premise, he overturned the French Revolution. So he's walking to the thing that he's supposed to be most brave. I guess that's sort of brave, but I think it's like stupidly brave. Because he could have ran away and lived for another day. In that Sun Tzu, if you come up against somebody you're equal, you fight. If you come across somebody you're equal or lesser than, you fight. But if you come across somebody stronger than you or greatly outnumbers you, you run. So you can live to fight another day. January 30th, 1649 was a bitterly cold day. He wanted 2 heavy shirts so that way it didn't look like he was afraid. I'm not afraid. And then sometimes people piss and shit themselves even when they're not afraid, right? But it's just like you ate something that morning and then it comes out of you after you're dead. The following account of the event comes from an anonymous observer and begins as the doomed king addresses the crowd from the scaffold. This is kind of nuts. I don't know if this looks real to me. So apparently the king was able to say a couple words to the crowd. So we're going to see the dialogue that had happened right before Charles of Fife is going to get his head chopped off. He didn't just have a last sentence or a couple words. My epitaph, I want it to be, I told you I had a stalker, you pieces of shit. I told you I had a stalker, you piles of shit. As for the people, truly I desire their liberty and freedom as much as anybody whomsoever, but I must tell you that their liberty and freedom consist in having a government whose laws by which their life and their goods may be most their own. It is not for having share in government, sirs. That is nothing pertaining to them. A subject and a sovereign are clear different things. Therefore, until they do that, I mean that you do put the people in that liberty, as I say, certainly they will never enjoy themselves, sirs. It was for this that I am come here. If I would have given way to an arbitrary way for to have all laws changed according to the power of the sword, I needed not to have come here. And therefore I tell you, and I pray God it be not laid to your charge that I am the martyr of the people. So I guess that's why he goes out, apparently dignified. But if you're going to be so dignified, why were you killing the Irish? Why were you killing the English? Why were you killing the Scottish? He was killing everybody. He was killing everybody, and he was doing it against everybody. If he could have said he was doing it in the betterment for people, but no, it was just blood shed all over the place. And to the execution, and those who live by the sword, die by the sword. And is Charles of Fife not just a man like anybody else? How many people, not only did he have his enemies, right, the English and the Irish and the Scots killed, but the soldiers that he sent out to kill them, they died too. Even the people that loved this Charles of Fife. And to the executioner he said, I shall say but very short prayers. And when I thrust out my hands, then he called to the bishop for his cap, and having put it on, asked the executioner, does my hair trouble you? Who desired him to put it all under his cap, which as he was doing by the help of the bishop and the executioner, he turned to the bishop and said, I have a good cause and a gracious God on my side. Because he's got those long flowing locks, right? Charles of Fife, he's got that long hair. He's a long-haired hippie. This authoritarian is a long-haired hippie. This damn authoritarian fascist pile of shit is I have a good cause and a gracious God on my side. The bishop said, there is but one stage more, which through turbulent and troublesome, yet is a very short one. You may consider it will soon carry you a very great way. Isn't that what Jesus is going to say? Eli, Eli, why hast thou forsaken me? Eli, Eli, it will carry you from earth to heaven, and there you shall find to your great joy the prize you hasten to, a crown of glory. The king adjoins, I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown, where no disturbance can be, no disturbance in the world. I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown. The bishop says you are exchanged from a temporal to an eternal crown, a good exchange. You have a temporary crown, and then you're going to an eternal crown. And they still do talk about, oh, King Charles, King Charles, King Charles, King Charles, King Charles. Fuck that motherfucker. I'm just going to name my kid King just so all y'all have to call him by a fucking title. Martin Luther King, that's my only king. That's the only king that I pray to. MLK, MLK forever. When the king asked the executioner, is my hair well? And taking off his cloak and George the jeweled pendant of the Order of the Garter bearing the figure of St. George, he delivered his George to the bishop. Then putting off his doublet and being in his waistcoat, he put on his cloak again, and looking upon the block, said to the executioner, you must set it fast. The executioner, it is fast, sir. King, it might have been a little higher. Executioner, it could be no higher, sir. King, when I put out my hands this way, then. So apparently he gestured something, some way he gestured with his hands. When I put out my hands like this, go ahead and do it. Then having said Then, having said a few words to himself, Charles of Fife stood with his hands and eyes lifted up, immediately stooping down. He laid his neck upon the block, and the executioner, again putting his hair under his cap, his majesty, thinking he had been going to strike, bade him, "Stay for the sign." Executioner, "Yes, I will, and it please your majesty." And it please your so it will please your majesty. So he'll say it'll be your majesty, still like pretending he's the... After a very short pause, Charles of Fife, stretching forth his hands, the executioner, with one blow, severed Charles of Fife's head from his body, which being held up and showed to the people, was with his body put into a coffin covered with black velvet and carried into his lodging. His blood was taken up by divers persons for different ends, by some as trophies of their villainy, by others as relics of a martyr, and in some hath had the same effect by the blessings of God, which was often found in his sacred touch when living. George Washington is a problematic person, but in the end, the American Revolution was victorious. Why? Because we got a constitution. We got the 3 branches of government. We got a Bill of Rights. We got a federalist system. There are so many checks and balances. You know what? How we can't get a goddamn tyrant? Okay, we got a president, but we got a governor. So who actually has more power in Colorado? The governor has all the power in Colorado. The president has hardly any power whatsoever. The American Revolution, even though George Washington has a lot of fucking problems, it was good. It was a good revolution. Why? Because we got the Bill of Rights. We have individual rights. We have states. We have a federal system. We got 3 branches of government. We got elections. So who would check the president? Well, you have 50 governors. Who's going to check the president? Who else is going to check the president? Well, you got legislature. You got Congress. You got 350 elected representatives who can check the president. The president has to get elected. You want to be king? Well, then go out and get 50 million voters. Get 50 million people to vote for you. Then you get to be king. And even when you're king, you still have to do things that are consistent with the Constitution, or else the Supreme Court will knock your shit down. And the legislature are the ones that's going to pass the brand new laws. So either you have to convince them, or you're going to have to go along with whatever they come up with. So we have a whole bunch of checks and balances. So that way you won't just have one fucking guy or one fucking woman who's just sitting there running roughshod over everybody, just laying waste to anybody and everybody no matter what. And even if you do get 50 million votes and you pass laws that are consistent with the Constitution and the judicial and the legislature and the states and even the people, right, with individual rights, he still can't take away our right to free speech. So he's checked in so many goddamn different ways. And that's a good thing. You don't want just some fucking asshole just saying, oh, you want to rule over the rest of us, and then the rest of us just going to fucking lay down and let you fucking do that shit? That's fucking crazy. Why did this fucking Charles of Fife think that he gets to rule over us? Because his mother or his father got to rule over us? That means you've had it good. You've had it rich and power your entire life, motherfucker. Why don't you go out and start a business and try to work yourself up to that position? I like the American way. It doesn't matter what womb you come out of. If you want to succeed in America, it doesn't matter what womb you come out of. Rags to riches. After 3 weeks, the monarchy officially abolished. The monarchy was officially abolished, and then Oliver Cromwell took control through Parliament. So we get, with Oliver Cromwell chopping off Charles of Fife's head, we get a constitution. We get 3 branches of government. Eventually, we're going to get a Bill of Rights, and then all these things are going to go into the American Revolution. So we get a federal system and elections, and they got a republic. They got a republic. January 30th, 1649 is when England became a republic. And they had a constitution. People talk about some sort of traditional constitution. I've never seen any kind of constitution coming out of England. I don't know what the hell they're even talking about. The constitution that the king said that he's got in his back pocket. Well, my back pocket constitution, the one that he just makes up at will, that's not a constitution. So congratulations to Cromwell. Cromwell is the Lord Protector, which is kind of the new king, but it's like the better king. It's the king that respects Parliament and a constitution and 3 branches of government.